Now, to customize the solution, this is where we start to get to the end of the conversation. So say you have like 10 minutes left in your 30-minute conversation. You've had some back and forth. You've offered some summaries and some insights. What I want you to then be able to do is start to set the stage and plant the seeds for giving a telling details of the solution that you might be able to offer them. Now, it could be that you get, say you have a longer discovery conversation, or you find out so much information that you can get through what we're going to talk about next week, which is the impact and the value of that. And you can completely do this entire thing. But I wanted to share this framework with you so that you could see how the questions that you're asking and the answers that you're getting, how they feed into you being able to position yourself in a value proposition. So first is, when you work with us, you can solve what is the major issue and challenge without the obstacles that they've identified. And then bringing into, with our quantifiable expertise, with our award-winning blah, 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 with our, proven bottom of the funnel types of things, specifically designed for this challenge, you can, and then whatever the deliverable is going to be, or the tactic that they're looking for. And that way they can reduce their risk or increase their opportunity. Now, and then you describe how you deliver that particular thing. And following that, you say, which means that you can achieve certain things with our proven ROI and a success rate for whatever addressed issue or challenge that we have, which means that you can go from here to here so that you can get the results and the goals that you want. All of the questions that we're asking is the fuel for us to be able to give those telling details that help people to connect the dots and align with, these are the issues that I have. This is the concrete pieces of the solution that are going to solve that. And because of this expertise, we're going to get this kind of a result. This is how we can connect the dots with our buyers about how we're going to solve their problems and help them, so that they never are left thinking, I'm not really sure how you can help me, or I'm not really sure how this solves that particular problem, because we have tied the knots for them. Now, once we've done that, it's time to set the next steps. And in those next steps, you want to ask some additional questions. How does this align with what you were thinking of for a solution? So you've gone through the rapport building, you've gone through setting expectations, you've asked your questions, you've asked summaries, and you've offered summaries and insights, and now you've given that telling details, or part of those telling details of how a solution might help with what they've shared so far, so that when you get to the next steps and you're setting it up for that, you can say, how does this align with what you were thinking for a solution? And then get whatever feedback they have, answer any questions or concerns that they might have. And then ask, so when you need to make these types of decisions, what's the next step in the process that you need to go through? This helps you to understand what in their mind the next step is going to be, so that you can align it with what you know the next step needs to be. I ask it by saying, so at this point, what would you like to do next? Where do you feel comfortable in moving forward? Maybe it's that they need to go and have a conversation with their team. Great. When is that conversation planned to happen? And then let's schedule a call after you have your conversation with your team, so we can hear what kinds of things that came up and address and answer those questions for you directly. So you can still set the next call, even if they say, I need to go talk with my team and do my due diligence. Set a timetable for that and a call to follow up with them so that you can find out how that due diligence went. Now, here's the big question. There is something in our minds that gets in the way of us asking these questions in a way that's collaborative with our buyers. Mindsets that impact us and how they can interact with each other. If you think about your evaluation that you've done and what you know so far about some of these mindsets, which one do you think is it that's going to get in the way of you being able to ask these questions? If you had to guess, is it the non-supportive buy cycle? Is it our need for approval? Is it our fear of rejection? Is it our emotional involvement in the conversation? Or is it our discomfort discussing money? So what happens when we get emotionally involved is buyers don't necessarily respond to us, right? Either in the conversation or afterwards. And that's happening when we lose our objectivity and ability to listen, because we are emotionally involved in the conversation. We're wrapped up in our heads about what to say next. But also the practice of being able to ask these questions is what's key. One of the ways that we can maintain our calmness to maintain being in the present moment is the self-care that we do for each other, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's going out for walks in nature when we feel stressed, whatever it is that's distracting you. And that's another thing. Turn off your distractions, your notifications, your social media pings and dings and emails and everything else that distracts you from being in the moment with someone. Because when you're in the moment and you're focused on them and you're actively listening, it is almost like your brains are in sync and you're starting to think of the things that you need to think of when you need to think of them without having to think about it. Say that 3 times fast. So being emotionally in control doesn't mean you don't have emotions. It just means that you recognize when you're having them and you're able to manage them. All of this is tied into, how does this impact me? How does this impact me getting to the next stage of the conversation? How does this impact me getting to the decision maker? How does this impact me in getting the deal done? Instead, we need to remember my favorite motto, which is, it's not about me. So if you do find in your evaluation that this is something that you struggle with, don't worry, 63% of professional sellers worldwide also struggle with this. This is normal, especially as a business owner who sells. This is how you're going to feed yourself and your family. This is how you're going to continue to pay your bills. So of course, there's some emotional things at stake here. So for us, it is even more important to maintain that level of self-care and mindfulness so that we can overcome those obstacles in our conversations. All right, here we go. In summary, one of the things that I want you to also take away from this is that the skills that you learn here in being able to ask good collaborative questions in discovery, it will never end. Like, the discovery phase of your conversations will never end. Even after they become a client, you should still be asking these types of questions so that you can uncover other unmet needs or get a sense of what might not be working for them. Discovery is a process that we need to continually do with our buyers, with our customers. And if you think about it, it's even what we do with our referral partners. We're always trying to discover new ways to get referrals or to make referrals to them. Even though we've presented this in a somewhat linear fashion, these conversations almost never happen the way that we plan, do they? They never happen as we go from here to here to here, which is why managing our emotions is, again, so important and key so that we can go within the flow of that conversation, but still hit on certain points as we go. So rather than thinking of this conversation as a step-by-step, we're going to go here to go there, I want you to think of it more like a puzzle, that you have pieces to the puzzle and you keep filling in those pieces of the puzzle. And this discovery conversation is really about how you do any puzzle. You start with the edges, right? So that you can figure out what kind of a framework you're working within. And then you continue to keep plugging away at those things. So think of this discovery conversation, and really every part of your conversation is, how can I continue to fill in the puzzle of what's the problem and solution for this particular buyer? The other thing is that, I think I said this before, that these open-ended sequential questions will help you to understand them and for them to start to change their minds. It's all because of that dopamine that gets happening in our brains when we share what we think, when we share what we want. It's where we build trust and relationships and bonds with people. So if you can get your buyers to start talking by asking open-ended sequential questions, you're winning the game. Closed questions being, you can answer it with a yes or a no. Open-ended being, you have to offer more information. It's the who's, the how's, the what's, the why's, the when's. Those are the open-ended question keys. Okay, so Q&A time. I'm going to ask you this question. How many questions do you think are too many questions to ask, say, in a 30-minute conversation of discovery? So data from Gong suggests that when you're talking with someone who's not an executive, that I think it's between 9 and 13 questions or so is the best point. What I recommend is that, especially if you're talking to an executive, it's even less. It's like 7 to 9 questions. So when you're thinking of the questions and you're writing them down, write down, so if 10 questions is going to be the limit, then write down 7 or 8 questions, which gives you some leeway to ask other questions that might come up as you go. That way, your buyer's not feeling inundated with questions, and it also forces you to ask really good targeted questions, because think of it as you have so many questions in your bank before you start to fatigue the buyer's mind. The next question I get out of is, what happens if I run out of time and I have more questions that I haven't gotten to yet? This is why managing the clock and also being in the present moment to know what time it is on the clock is so incredibly important. So if you find, as I have sometimes found, that you get someone on the phone who has very long-winded answers or will tell you their entire life story with half of the call, you can, and we can talk about this in our group coaching, how to tactfully interrupt people so you can stay on track. But if that isn't possible, which sometimes it's not, then what you need to do is manage the clock in a way that you can say, you know what, I know that we've scheduled 30 minutes. I have a few minutes to stay later if you do, but do you have a hard stop at the bottom of the hour? If so, maybe we should probably schedule another call so that we can go into even more details and maybe schedule more time. So if you find yourself up against the clock, don't try to cram all of the questions in, because you want to make sure that you're leaving that last 5 minutes for setting whatever those next steps are going to be. That's more important than getting all your questions in, because you can always schedule another call and do additional questions later. All right, last question. How do I practice this? What if I don't have enough buyers to talk to actually practice asking these questions? That's a good thing. I don't want you practicing on your buyers. I want you to practice on me. I want you to practice with each other. I want you to practice on everybody around you. Because asking these open-ended sequential questions, setting agendas, and establishing next steps is something you can do in just about every conversation that you have to a degree. So when you're going out today and you're talking with family or friends or people in a co-working space or your Uber driver or your barista, just start asking them some open-ended questions. And get in the practice of doing that and being in the present moment with them instead of looking at our phones or doing whatever else it is. That repetition is going to help you. I'm seeing data that shows that it takes about 30 repetitions of something for us to start to establish a change in ourselves.